You sit handcuffed in the back of the van, straining to catch a glimpse of the world through the windows blacked out. Two burly officers sit on either side of you, staring straight ahead, silent and stoic. Your gaze drifts to the padded panels to protect you from smashing in your head. You wonder, how could this happen? You are not insane, right? You're about to become a resident of Broadmoor Hospital. But this isn't any normal psychiatric hospital. It is the most notorious criminal lunatic asylum in history. It was once the home of the Yorkshire Ripper, the Stockwell Strangler, and who could forget the monster and maniac the British tabloid media liked to call Hannibal the Cannibal. You hear a gate creaking open, followed by the crunch of gravel under the van's tires. 1,000 terrifying thoughts rush through your head. You can't stop thinking about what Britain's most violent prisoner, Charles Bronson, or is it Charles Salvador, once said. He's the guy who spent decades in the dark isolation of solitary confinement, enduring relentless, brutal beatings. And yet, even he once said that nothing, absolutely nothing, was as horrifying as Broadmoor. Salvador's foreboding words run through your mind as the van's brakes squeal to a stop. Broadmoor creeps into your blood. The walls touch the sky and the ground sucks you in. So many monsters, men of hell. I don't know how a sane man can keep sane in there. If you're not crazy when you go in, which you're clearly not, this place will make you crazy. The van door opens and daylight floods your eyes, blinding you. As you step onto the concrete path, a Victorian structure looms overhead. The red brick and large barred windows look unwelcoming and imposing. In the distance, high walls and coils of barbed wire wrap around the sprawling complex. There is a frightening-looking gatehouse behind you with twin towers. But there's a sense of deceptive charm. Manicured lawns, colorful flower gardens, and there's even benches to sit on for an afternoon stroll. But it's a facade, a trick for the unassuming mind. After all, if the gates of hell didn't look inviting, you wouldn't go in. A man stands in the garden holding a pair of pruning shears. He grins as he holds up his hand like a child and waves at you. For all you know, this guy could be crazy. He could have murdered his parents with a cordless drill, and you'll be living with these people. "Enough guffing, mate," says one of the officers, pulling your arm toward the entrance. The driller killer is still waving as you're dragged down the pathway toward the doors flanked by metal detectors, cameras, x-ray machines. On the other side, waiting for you, are two smiling women with ribbons and IDs around their necks. Behind them are the heavies, aka the orderlies, 4 muscular men in white polo shirts, long keychains dangling down their pressed black pants. You'll soon be very familiar with the important role that they play in Broadmoor. You already know what they're thinking. You're just another loon, another crazy person they'll have to hold down as someone sticks a needle into your arm and knocks you sideways with powerful drugs. You heard there were over 200 patients in Broadmoor, and all of them are drugged up to the eyeballs, if they still have eyeballs. You've done your research on this place. You read that everyone is zonked 24/7 to keep them from telling the truth. You know all about that award-winning playwright who said he spent 22 years here knocked out daily by what he called zombie drugs, all because he had posed the hospital authorities. Like you, he refused to admit he was mad. That is the asylum catch-22. If you were sane, you wouldn't deny being mad. You also know your rights, which is problematic because you don't have any. In Britain, under the rules of the Mental Health Act, a regular person can't be forced to take drugs, but you're not a regular person. You've been sectioned after committing a criminal act, a violent act, so they can pump you full of whatever they want, especially if you raise your hand to them. Admittedly, not raising your hand has never been one of your strong points. At least there's no strip search here, no hostile officer shoving prison clothes at you or branding you with a number. It almost feels civilized. You're not a number, and you can wear your civilian clothes. They've already taken off your handcuffs. That was just for transportation. You guess you mustn't be what they call a high-risk prisoner. Wait, that's not right. You're now a patient. In here, you're no longer an inmate, but that doesn't make you feel free. The woman with the ID around her neck comes up to you and shakes your hand, a big smile on her face. She says she's the director. In the background, a couple of patients just walk about freely down a pink hallway. One of the guys has huge slash scars all over his arms. This is the natural habitat of cutters, where even the most ordinary things lack sharp edges. The director calmly explains that you'll be allocated a ward today, but first you'll need to go through a medical check and an initial psychiatric assessment with one of the hospital psychiatrists. You just hope it's not another one of those Rorschach ink blot tests. For some reason, you always see things like evil vagina monsters holding flamethrowers or wicked witches plotting your imminent death. The psychiatrists never seem amused by your answers. Then another woman steps up and tells you she will be your primary nurse. She's the one you'll be closest to during your time here. You're gonna get to know this woman well, very well. In other words, she'll be watching you constantly, reporting back to the psychiatrists, keeping tabs on your every move, and summoning the goon squad whenever they think you need a closed-door conversation. You force a smile and politely say hello, all the time thinking, "Got your number, missy." You once read about that boy who killed a family member and he was still in Broadmoor when he was a grown man, sketching frankly amazing pictures and self-portraits. And then there was the case of William Giles, who walked through the doors of Broadmoor in 1885 at the age of 10 and died there, aged 87 in 1962. He was one of Broadmoor's many arsonists. Matches and lighters in here are like giving grenades to babies. They take you into a room and you get a physical, blood pressure, weight, height, and a series of questions about diseases, previous surgeries, allergies. Turns out you're fit as a fiddle. It's the initial psychiatric evaluation where things take a darker turn. A guy sits across from you looking at a folder. It annoys you just thinking about all the lies someone will have written in there. He tells you what you already know, that you've been diagnosed as bipolar and suffering from persistent paranoia and severe delusions of persecution. You kidnapped a civil enforcement officer, he tells you. You mean meter maid, a parking ticket Nazi, you think? But you just say yes. You have to go through it all again. You explain he was trying to plant evidence in your car. Evidence he somehow managed to drop as you chased him down the road with a cricket bat in your hand. Yes, you hit him over the head, but you didn't mean to hurt him. It was supposed to be a friendly tap. And yes, you bundled him into your car, preceded by a lengthy interrogation when you got back home, where you tied him to a chair in your cellar. Of course, as any well-trained intelligence asset, he denied everything. Lucky for him, you think, I couldn't find the leads for the car battery. I see you like to smoke cannabis on a daily basis, said the psychiatrist. God, that annoys you. You can handle your weed, it hardly even affects you. You explained for the umpteenth time that you've been on the verge of a breakthrough in your investigation into the death of Princess Diana. You were this close, you tell him, before you got hacked. They knew you knew. MI6, the CIA, SAS, the global Illuminati, maybe all of them. They couldn't let you expose their secrets, not when you were so close to revealing everything. These are paranoid delusions, he tells you, for which we can medicate you, but you'll need plenty of therapy. As he says that, you think, sheep? His white shirt suddenly looking like a thick coat of wool. You're not going to let them beat you, but you just nod your head. It's the only way you'll get out of this place. He gives you a plan of action and lists all the people who will be part of your multidisciplinary team. It's explained to you that you'll start your life in Broadmoor in one of the admissions wards. Depending on your behavior, your progress, you could eventually be moved to a medium or low dependency ward. Given the violent nature of your crime, despite the fact that you let the meter maid go and even fed him all the beans and toast he could eat, you won't be placed in one of the freer rehab wards. Those are reserved for patients with spotless records. You can work your way up to that, or, as you're about to discover, work your way down to a ward that feels a lot more like prison. As you walk to your ward with an orderly, you pass more men walking around freely, chatting and joking, as if this is some kind of holiday home. You walk past the common room where guys are watching what looks like BBC News. Sheep. You're absolutely dreading when you have to actually speak to some of these nutters. What on earth will you talk about? Hey, I've always wanted to meet a serial killer. Not. It's a huge place with 16 wards and over 230 beds, but right now, you're only seeing a very small piece of the entire complex. All the doors in the rooms have 2 locks and a little window about waist height. A couple of times you see the doctors sitting on chairs talking to whoever's in the room, like they're shouting through a letterbox. In one of the rooms, the guy inside is screaming and swearing. Not a good sign for your group therapy. One thing that stands out is how everything is painted in pastel shades. Pinks, greens, beiges, and yellows. Obviously to calm these lunatics down when their meds don't work. It's like a giant set on a children's TV program, and just as weird. When you get to your room, the curtains are pink, covering a window behind white bars. There's a small single bed with a light blue bed cover and a pink blanket to match the curtains. There's also a small flat-screen TV and a pair of speakers below a framed print on the wall of more happy faces smiling. It's all a big trick, you think. It's hiding something very sinister. Do you have Wi-Fi? You ask the orderly, half joking because you don't expect it, and he says, yeah, of course we do. He tells you that you can use your phone for the internet, and if you've got a music app, you can hook it up to those Bluetooth speakers. Now you gotta admit, being accused of being crazy has its perks. This place is like a mini hotel. The downside is your wardrobe is packed into a tiny bathroom. Although it has a normal-looking toilet bowl, not one of those ugly steel things in prisons. Things are just starting to look up when you hear the sound of feet marching down the corridor sounding like Roman sentries. You look outside and there are a bunch of guys in what looks like full riot gear, black helmets, and chest protection, holding large riot shields. They march right past your door, presumably on their way to a good old-fashioned room extraction. "Don't worry about that, mate," the orderly says, seeing the look of fear on your face. "You'll be all right. You like this guy. He's got a friendly face, and he's definitely not one of them. Still, you'll soon become acquainted with some, old-school orderlies." It's already late in the day, so you lie on the bed and try to get some sleep as the TV plays in the background. Occasionally, someone wakes you up by knocking on the door just to ask if you're okay. Someone brings around a tray of food around 7 p.m., which is actually far better than the prison food. Fish fingers, chips, beans, and a styrofoam cup of what tastes like cheap supermarket soda. You wonder if anyone's ever self-harmed with a fish finger as you drift off to sleep again. At 9 p.m., they lock the door. Later, for some reason, men start screaming. Broadmoor has a lot of nocturnal screamers. You close your eyes and try to sleep. But in a place like this, rest doesn't come easy. At 7:30 on the dot, an orderly opens your door and tells you it's time to get up. He takes you to a cafeteria where you can choose from cereal, eggs, toast, even coffee and tea. This really is like a holiday camp, except all of the knives and forks are made of plastic. You sit alone. A group of guys occasionally look you over, one of them grinning like a Cheshire cat. At 9, your primary nurse tells you what you'll be doing all day. In the future, if you improve, she says, you can sign up for a job earning about 80 pence or $1 an hour making handicrafts. She then takes you to a shop that's lined with shelves of sweets, crisps, noodles, and chocolate. Something to spend your hard-earned cash on if they ever trust you enough to handle a pair of child-proof scissors. Next up is what you were dreading: group therapy. You take a seat in the room with 8 other guys, most of them slumped over on their chairs, their eyes glazed, their bellies flabby. So many patients here are overweight. It must be the drugs, you think. That grinning man from breakfast looks right at you and just bursts out laughing. "Ignore him," says a young man to your right. But the other guy starts laughing even louder. The therapist walks in and lays down paper squares numbered from 1 to 10 on the floor. "Today we're going to talk about feelings of persecution," he says. "Oh no, not this malarkey again," you think. He explains that everyone should choose a number. 1 being you have no feelings of persecution whatsoever today, and 10 being you feel extremely persecuted. "10!" a voice screams in your head, "for putting me through this nonsense." Each guy gets up in turn and stands next to his chosen number, most choosing 5 to 8. Then one by one they explain why they feel persecuted, using their, quote, newfound skills in normal people rationalization. The exercise is as surreal as it sounds, with each man trying to justify his sense of persecution like he's part of a twisted self-help seminar. When it's your turn, you stand next to 1. "I don't feel persecuted at all," you say proudly. "In fact, I'm just grateful for the chance to share my experiences with everyone here. I know y'all will help me through this difficult period in my life." You know how to play this game. These suckers will believe everything you tell them. The laughing guy starts up again, and you suddenly feel the urge to smash his teeth down his throat. "Do you feel anger right now?" the therapist asks as he's looking at your curled lip and your glaring eyes. You shake your head from side to side like a child denying he stole money. The fool believes you. Next up is another one-on-one with a psychiatrist and an explanation of the medicine you're about to take. The notorious Broadmoor Special. It's a cocktail of benzodiazepines, antidepressants, and antipsychotics. There's no point in arguing why you don't need them, so you swallow them in front of a nurse who then checks your mouth. An hour later, you're in the TV room feeling like one of Jeffrey Dahmer's experimental zombies. You're confused, you can barely focus, there's a horrible metallic taste on your tongue, and your mouth is really dry. That guy you saw yesterday with all the scars on his arms is trying to tell you something, but it's hard to understand it in your antipsychotic coma. He's even saying something about how he used to be locked up in an intensive care ward where he couldn't even leave the room without 6 people being present. He gnashes his teeth together with a sharp biting sound, chuckling as he recalls that one time he bit off a part of a doctor's nose. But he's much better now, he assures you, grinning as he reveals those same teeth. "That was 11 years ago," he says, still smiling. "You have to get out of here. You are not like these people." You think back to what happened to Peter Sutcliffe, the Yorkshire Ripper, when he was in here. One guy walked into his room and almost strangled him to death with a headphones cable. On another occasion during Mr. Ripper's long incarceration, a violent convicted killer took a pen and stabbed him in both eyes, blinding him in one and severely damaging the other. It's hard to feel sorry for a guy who mutilated women with screwdrivers, but that's not the point. You're surrounded by potential eye stabbers. Any one of these psychos could turn paranoid and find a reason to attack you. After lunch, you're ushered into another one-on-one session, this time with a counselor who has a crisp American accent. A CIA spook if you ever seen one. She shows you a sheet of paper with blocks on it denoting 5-week periods of what she'll be doing with you. The blocks say things like managing symptoms, managing emotions, conflict resolution, relationship skills enhancement. With a practiced smile, she says a lot of time will be spent on addressing your childhood trauma. I'm not traumatized, you think? I just don't like talking about my dad. The very thought of him makes you erupt with blinding fury. You stand up, balling your fists, and scream at her. My emotions are just fine and I am not traumatized. You're inventing things so you have an excuse to keep me in here. Oops. Massive oops. Suddenly, 2 beefy guys grab you by the arms. They don't do pressure point holds, that's illegal, but their grips feel like you're being squeezed in an industrial vice. I'll see you tomorrow, says the counselor, smiling, as you're being pulled around like a rag doll. We'll need to work on that temper of yours, she says condescendingly. As they bundle you through the doorway, you very nearly scream back, "What temper?" Of the 200 patients in here, about 50 come in each year as 50 go out. You are not even close to the getting out stage. Phase 3, where the patients have almost complete freedom in assertive rehabilitation. After what you just did, you could end up in a high-security ward, like prison, but with softer blankets and stronger drugs. You read that the average stay here is 5 years. Maybe one day you'll become the 5% who stays over 20 years, especially if you keep raising your fists to petite American intelligence agents. The orderlies drag you back to your room. When the door closes behind you, one of them knees you in the balls. They tell you to strip, mocking what until now you always thought was a very reasonably sized pecker. With force, they throw you back against the wall and you land on the bed like a helpless, naked baby. Next time you try that, one of them growls, we'll introduce you to some boot therapy, freak. The other one starts laughing and says in a really mocking tone, he thinks he knows who killed Princess Di. As they leave, for the first time, you feel incredibly vulnerable. You now realize even the orderlies in here don't have your best interests at heart, and you wonder who told them about Diana. Definitely MI6. You don't say anything to your primary nurse about the beating when she comes to your room later and tries to talk about your outburst. You kinda like her, she's obviously not one of them. I'm not insane, you're thinking, but you just say sorry repeatedly. You feel like breaking down and crying when she puts her arm over your shoulder and tells you that she's here for you whenever you need her. It's probably only the second time in your life someone held you when they weren't going to hurt you. The medication you're given a little bit later looks different from yesterday. The pills aren't the same color. And about an hour later, you're slouched on your bed, saliva dripping down your chin, tongue pushing out against your bottom lip. Teletubbies is playing on the TV, but you're too wasted to follow the story. Your brain is made of tubby custard, and your spiritual home is obviously the Tubbytronic Superdome. Well, that's a day over with, says the psychiatrist at your meeting that afternoon. Are we feeling any better? Anything to report? Feelings of paranoia? Bite me, you think, behind the toxic pharmaceutical smog that has smothered your prefrontal cortex. But they're not going to get you that easy. No paranoia, you try to tell him, but it comes out as You try to smile, but you can't pull back your tongue, so a huge drop of saliva dribbles down your chin. Good, good, he says. So glad we're making progress. You nod your head as a tendril of drool swings out like a pendulum and latches onto your neck. This guy's definitely Illuminati, you think. You're gonna have to keep an eye on him. Still zonked, you shuffle back to your room. You barely look up as a patient in Winnie the Pooh pajamas runs right past you, screaming and stabbing his forehead with a king-size Toblerone. Guards run after him like the Keystone Cops. 5 years of this, you think, as you flop down on your bed, catching a glimpse of your vegetative state face in the mirror. Someone knocks at your door, making you jump in drugged-up slow motion. At the other side of the little window flap is a pair of thick spectacles and a big, friendly smile. It's Bob from Bradford, your neighbor. He strangled his 8-year-old sister in 1991 over something he can't even remember. Hey, he says, excitedly jabbing a plastic spoon in a stabbing motion. We got cake! If you were in Broadmoor, what would be your biggest challenge? Facing other patients, strict routines, or isolation? Let us know how you'd cope or escape in the comments. Now go check out why you wouldn't survive Alcatraz prison, or click on this video instead.